Thank you so much, and to their excellencies, the distinguished panelists, as well as the distinguished participants. Thank you, Paula, for having us as the SADC Secretariat. We just want to share experiences that have been made by the Secretariat when it basically comes to disaster risk recovery. And we are going to be basing our sharing of information on 4 questions. Maybe go on to the next slides that are covering on key priorities, the issues that are around recovery planning, and also we want to look at the partnerships that should unfold to facilitate effective recovery. And also we look at the areas of focus as we make a shift to influence the provisions of the Sendai and enabling a systematic undertaking of disaster risk recovery in the global community, in our regions, and in supporting the various member states. The next slide, please. I will share with you a case study that we have on the Sendai, the impacts that we've had in the region on the tropical cyclone Idai that affected 3 countries in particular. There was Malawi, Mozambique, and then Zimbabwe. We are grateful to have had Mr. Nkomo share his experience on Zimbabwe. And we had about 10 lessons that were derived from that particular lesson learning. One of the key ones that are related to recovery was that there was very minimal planning that was undertaken that included or integrated recovery related issues. And also there were issues around recovery resources and also the capacity that was going to be enabling the development or charting the strategic frameworks that are going to be informing the activities that will be implemented in the various countries. We noted that with various assistance that was provided at the domestic level, at the regional level, and by the international stakeholders, the PDNAs and the RNA actually amounted all the needs for recovery to over $10 billion US. And at this stage, given that this occurred in 2019, there are outstanding efforts that are being made on the ground. Next slide, please. But when we look at the first issue when it comes to the priority, I just wanted us to look at the fact that we have found that we have had challenges with deepened information and knowledge management on the environment and socio-economic landscapes. These come into light when it comes to urbanization, ecosystem deterioration, and also biodiversity. There are many more sectors that we are missing information on, and there are implications on disaster risk management and recovery. There is also lack of comprehensive systematic data collection, modeling analysis and knowledge management approaches towards effective disaster risk management, the interconnectedness of development sectors and the infrastructure, in particular when it comes to provision of the information that is required for access to services and productivity. The issues that are around the facilitative regulatory frameworks and the decision-making processes, and also the capacity for strategic recovery frameworks, financing resources and their instruments, in particular risk transfer options that could be put in place at both global level as well as the regional level, and both from the public and the private sector. And then lastly, the systematic tracking of how climate change fuels disaster risk to influence recovery and resilience building. The next slide, please. And when it comes to the next question on planning, next slide, please. We found that with planning aspects, we have a challenge with the delineation of recovery in regional and national development planning. In fact, it is not even integrated in the planning process. And this is one of the large gaps that we have identified when it comes to preparedness for recovery. The embedment of DRR mainstreaming in policy development as a development planning and development accountability tool is also one of the gaps that have been identified as building resilience for the various sectors to facilitate their in situ undertaking of recovery before the convergence into regional or national development platforms. We also noted that we need more change when it comes to risk communication and enforcement of the Building Back Better strategies and frameworks provisions. There also needs to be some improvement in risk modeling and capabilities, as well as the predictions of the scale of the risks that we face, as well as the timing of the risk events. And this facilitates timely response, preparedness, as well as early recovery. We need to strengthen sectoral linkages for DRR. At this moment, you find that it is too centralized. And I think that with the mutations of the COVID-19, we have been exposed to the fact that more sectors have been affected, and therefore we need these sectors to be strengthened to facilitate DRR planning. We also need to facilitate the integration of infrastructure standards and codes, given the outstanding efforts that are being made in the various countries when it comes to reconstruction and also the development infrastructure, such as the clinics, the schools that are being affected. We also want to have inclusive planning with consideration for social norms and practice of the most at risk or the vulnerable people. Next slide, please. On the future initiatives, we want to look at the responsive frameworks and engagement on recovery, meaning that we need to look at amendment or reviews of the disaster risk management frameworks to involve better recovery aspects and to facilitate better recovery aspects. And on the partnerships, one of the things that is very, very critical is to have those stakeholders that have worked with us at the regional level to facilitate data convergence. This is regards the multiplicity of the various risks that we are currently facing. We also need partners to facilitate cooperation in pooling of risk transfer resources for resilience building. And we have started working on a study to develop a concept note to develop these various options for insurance building. We also need more partnerships when it comes to research, knowledge building and management to inform the frameworks and decision making. Next slide, please. I just want to share with you some of the things that we are undertaking as a region when it comes to partnerships and sharing of information. We are putting in place a community of practice working with the UNDP. This is basically to provide a consultation forum that brings people together to share on their experiences for recovery. We also want to strengthen the capacities in the region for PDNAs and DRFs for quality contribution to national planning and budgeting systems, as well as looking at the fiscal space in an effective manner. We also want to have a sharing platform for these experiences. And at this stage, we have developed the guidelines and we're in the forum to facilitate the annual meeting of our member states to discuss the issues around recovery. Next slide, please. We also want to facilitate, we also want, the global community to look at the adjustments of or critical measures that need to be undertaken in order to influence the Sendai framework's provisions in the last 7 years. That is deepen DRR integration in regional and national development planning And we also want to make sure there is systematic collation of loss and damage information. It might not be loss and damage information, but we want to facilitate an analytic and building of culture for analyzing impacts and their trends, so that this particular information is also fed into national development planning processes, so that it informs timely decision-making. It informs the frameworks that need to be taken into consideration, whether those are at transboundary level, whether those are at national level, but it is just for facilitating that decision-making. We want to also strengthen research and analytics for risk communication and cultural norms. I think that we learned from COVID-19. We want to facilitate gender analysis for inclusive recovery, and also the issue that our economic, our socio-economic and productivity as a people of the SADC region is mainly born out of the informal sector. And in many ways, this informal sector has not been really analyzed to know that how does it influence the recovery frameworks that need to be taken in place. And this is just one area where we need more insight and quantification in order to influence the issues that are key to the vulnerable people that are pertinent to their situation. In this regard, I just want to thank you. We go on to the last slide for your attention and for providing SADC with the opportunity to share their experiences. Over to you, Paula.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gina, for this very comprehensive insight, really looking at recovery planning and partnership, touching upon lessons learned, also accompanied by the challenges and the gaps that needs to be addressed. Can I ask you a question in a very succinct manner, as you already touched upon in your presentation? You spoke about partnership. Out of the experience you have had, what are, in your view, the new initiative and partnership that should become available to governments in order to move forward this agenda?
In terms of the partnerships that needed to be put in place to facilitate national development, basically, we've had the concept of the PPEs facilitating different development issues over time. And I think that we need to enable that, in particular on one sector now, when it comes to risk transfer. At this stage, it's mainly the commercial sector that is embracing that kind of a partnership. And we need to move this to the public sector so that it also embraces the benefits that could be derived in this regard, in order to bring all the partners together, to bring that comparative advantage, to contribute to facilitating resilience building in affording the availability of the resources to the people that are most at risk, or those productive lines and flows that would be considered in that particular process.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gina. Very, very clear.